specifically if you talk about, and I don't mean it from any, negative sentiment, but from a perspective of being female, being there, is it made in a different manner to suit everyone, or like is it really difficult for someone, women actually being there and doing it?
Generally, the males around, they would be very protective in the sense that they would initially, obviously it's a mental conditioning, as I'm saying. Things are very different now, but by the time that I had joined, it was slightly different because there was a lot of novelty at that time. So because of the novelty, there were a lot of teething issues. That's all I would say, because obviously it was difficult for them as well. If you know, in the armed forces, women are always to be respected.
And is it difficult to get tough jobs, like tough and challenging jobs? Like, does that happen that if that decision has to be made, and that a senior is making that decision, and it's a very tough, very critical job, and you have to command, let's say, some officers, did you ever feel that, the males were getting more kind of those set of jobs, and it was a little difficult for you to get those sort of jobs from the seniors?
I think from day one in the Officers Training Academy, when we undergo training, as I was just telling you, it is all about strengthening your mind first. So before the physical, that's one of the things, but it's about your own, training your mind to think that you can do it, and face and putting yourself through various situations and still, coming out stronger each time.
दोस्तों, इस वीडियो में मैंने बात की है कैप्टन सजीता नायर से। कैप्टन सजीता नायर आर्मी में पहुंचने वाली वन ऑफ द वेरी फर्स्ट फीमेल थी। उनके क्या चैलेंजेस रहे आर्मी लाइफ में, उन्होंने कैसे एक फीमेल होके भी एक मेल डोमिनेंट इंडस्ट्री में अपनी जगह बनाई, हमने इन सारी चीज़ों के बारे में डिटेल में डिस्कशन किया है। यही नहीं दोस्तों, इस प्रोफेशन के बाद आज की डेट में वो 4 बुक्स लिख चुकी हैं। तो हमने राइटिंग प्रोफेशन के बारे में, राइटिंग की प्रोसेस के बारे में, उनकी बुक्स के बारे में, मार्केटिंग एंड फाइनेंशियल एंगल के बारे में, किस तरीके से एक राइटर अपनी बुक को लिखता है, कैसे उसको पब्लिश कराता है और कैसे उससे पैसे कमाता है, इस सारे प्रोसेस के बारे में भी बहुत ही डिटेल में बात की है। अगर आप एक फीमेल साइड ऑफ स्टोरी को जानना चाहते हैं, जिसने आर्मी लाइफ देखी है, जिसने सक्सेस देखा है इन टर्म्स ऑफ बीइंग अ राइटर, तो इस कन्वर्सेशन को आप बहुत एंजॉय करेंगे। वीडियो अगर अच्छा लगे तो वीडियो को लाइक कीजिएगा, चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कीजिएगा। एंजॉय द कन्वर्सेशन। ओके, सो मैम, लेट्स स्टार्ट विद योर probably life at army. I think
Okay.
I'm really fascinated to know that, at the time when you joined army, if you can start from that, how did you dream about getting into army? Because I believe at that point of time when you joined, not many women were, joining army, and I think yours was probably second, third, or fourth batch,
Right.
very initial phase, right? So how did that dream come about? And then related to a little bit about from the reality as well, that when you actually went in first day, did the dream took a hit? Was it something different, and how was the experience there?
Okay, all right. Yeah, the dream came about because my father served in the Air Force. I really used to love the P-cap that he used to wear. And I would, stand in front of the mirror and wear the P-cap and look at myself and say, wow, that looks very smart. But after that, then, there was no avenue at that time, but, women were not being recruited in the armed forces. So that's when it just so happened that the doors were thrown open for women to be serving in the armed forces. And I applied. Luckily I got through, and I went for training at the OTA. It was very, very tough. I can only say that much, but I think it is required for any person in the armed forces to undergo that kind of training, because it takes you to your extremities of endurance, both physical and mental. So yes, when I joined the OTA, I think I didn't realize that what kind of training it could be. So yes, that came as a it came as a surprise. I mean, I wasn't really not surprised really, but yeah, I'd heard from my dad that training can be very tough. But yes, when I was undergoing that myself, then I realized how tough it can be. So yes, the training.
Okay, and how, like what happens in a training? Like how difficult? Like just for the audience to understand, when you say difficult, what do you mean by difficult? What happens there?
Oh, well, the day starts at 5 o'clock with, the day is packed with activities. There's a combination of both physical activities like your PT and swimming and cross country runs and PPT, battle physical endurance tests, and then there are classroom sessions, and then there is sand model discussion. And I mean, the whole day is packed. In the evening, there could be a co-curricular activity sometimes, you're there performing sometimes. So, I mean, a whole lot of activities. So there's really no time because you get up very early and you go to, bed exhausted by the end of the day. And then again, the next day, the whole thing starts. And then the most important thing I missed out is the drill. Because, for the passing out parade that happens after the training, every day you have to be at the drill square practicing your marches, and it is immaculate. It is so perfect. I don't know if you've been to a military passing out parade, but yes, a lot of practice goes into that. So yes, so it's a whole lot of activities, and at the end of the training, when you actually get your stars, then everything becomes worthwhile.
Yeah, is it physically taxing? Like, for specifically, if you talk about, and I don't mean it from any negative sentiment, but from a perspective of being female, being there, is it made in a different manner to suit everyone, or like, is it really difficult for someone, woman actually being there and doing it?
Well, not exactly. I mean, what I have learned at the academy is that not most, in fact, everything is in the mind. So the moment I think that, oh, I'll not be able to do it, I'll never be able to do it. But the moment I think, okay, let me try, I am going to do it, I will do it. The moment I make up my mind, I've realized that I'm able to do a lot of things which I, earlier thought impossible. So yes, I think it's all about how, irrespective of whether it's a male or a female, the training is equal for everyone as of now. Sometime back, they were just experimenting as to how far they can get with training lady cadets. So there were certain places where distances could be a little shorter sometimes, or timing could be a little more lenient. But right now, the lady officers who undergo training at the Officers Training Academy, or even at the NDA, the National Defense Academy, they have to undergo exactly the same kind of training, because they're just going to become officers like anyone, like a gentleman officer.
And like, so let's talk about your days actually in the army. So when you actually went in, and you being probably had no one, I'm assuming you didn't have anyone to look up to at that point of time, because as you said, I mean, initially 2-3 batches only.
Right.
So how difficult was it being a female cadet or a female captain, or like whatever you joined, when you joined at that point of time? How difficult was it to be there in a male dominated space, to get that respect from everyone? Was it challenging, and how did you basically cope up with that?
Yes, so if you look at the mental conditioning of the society, so it's mostly everyone always thinks that army and things like that is just for males, and it is male dominated. So as a woman, when I went to my first unit, there was a little, difficulty in accepting that, okay, this lady is now coming to command us, like as a senior. You're an officer, and there are then the other ranks, right? So it was a little difficult, but then also that you quickly adapt, you learn. Okay, for me, my tactic was that I would come across as any other officer. So I would not, in fact, I would also refer to myself as hum, just so that, the gender thing wasn't very obvious. So I would not say, main ye karungi. I would not say something like that. I would say, hum ye karenge. So it was always like that. It was also including, all of them. At the same time, also ensuring that, my gender did not really come in between my work and my relationship with the men I worked with.
So that's a story from your perspective. I'm sure that
Yes.
that's your coping mechanism,
Right,
being in
right,
that space. But
right.
how did the others react to it? Were they comfortable, being commanded by a female officer? Why I ask you this, it's not just about your story in the army. Lot of times, and it's true for both male and female, lot of times when we dream of doing something which is unconventional, it's not just you and your brain which is probably stopping you. Yes, you have to win the battle here first, but then when you are in that space, it's also about tackling the society, tackling the norms which are set. So I'm sure you would have also challenged some norms being there, and challenged some probably, backward thinking being there from the male credits or from the male members. So how did that happen? Was it difficult for you to cope up with that kind of expectations or that kind of scenarios that you faced with the males being there?
No, see, what happened was that generally the males around, they would be very protective in the sense that they would initially, obviously, it's a mental conditioning, as I'm saying. Things are very different now, but by the time that I had joined, it was slightly different because there was a lot of novelty at that time. So because of the novelty, there were a lot of teething issues. That's all I would say, because obviously it was difficult for them as well. If in the armed forces, women are always to be respected. Like when a lady walks in, let's say in a room, so a chair is pulled out for her, the door is held open for her, these things. And suddenly now it became very difficult for the men folk, the gentlemen officers. Now here is a lady, but at the same time, she's a junior officer. So what do you do now? So I can understand they were totally confused. So at such times, it was always upon the lady officer to say that, sir, please go ahead. Or, even when you are having a food and all that, it's always seniors first and then the juniors. So sometimes some of the officers would say, yes, why don't you go ahead? You're a lady. So at that time, you had to reiterate, sir, I'm Captain so-and-so or Lieutenant so-and-so, so you please go ahead. So you had to, it was important for, from the lady officers perspective to make a stand there, to say that I'm an officer first here. I'm not here as a lady. So, don't treat me as a lady here. And that became very confusing for the men folk. And it is understandable. It's very understandable, because the men were so used to, treating women a certain way. And suddenly now here comes a woman who also wears stars on her shoulder, and she's a very junior officer. So how do you, treat her? So yes, there was a little confusion in the beginning. So as I said, there were a lot of teething troubles in the beginning, which has all been smoothened out now. And now, it's kind of all settled and people understand what it is. And earlier, I remember that some officers used to think that being lady officers, we should also attend the the ladies club meets. So again, it was to be reiterated that here we are in this unit as officers and not, lady wives, as we say in the army. So lady wife is an officer's wife, essentially. So that way. So, so both ways, lady officers had to do some part. The officers had to, now adapt and adjust. Okay, now this is a new thing that is happening. Changes are coming in. And slowly we also have to adapt with the changes.
And just from, and probably last question in this regard, and then I'll move on to something else. So
all right.
Because you have done it, so I just want to understand, going inside and trying to visualize what it would have meant for you. So when you were going through this process, and of course these changes are happening, and you're saying that it's understandable how the males were treating you and all, but just from a perspective of doing the duty in the army, is it is it a little more difficult or a little more challenging for someone like you, or someone who's coming from, because when I say someone like you, I don't mean to say woman, I mean someone who has been because there's a mental convention that happens, right? So it's not just about army officials, it's also about you being there, right? You also have to probably consider yourself equal enough to do all the tasks, right? Did that doubt ever hit you, that maybe this is okay, but maybe this is something that I will probably not do, let me leave it for men to do it? Did that happen ever?
Never. That could not happen at all, because we have been trained to be officers. So any task that came our way, I'm talking for all the lady officers now, because I know quite a few of them, and no, never did they ever say that no, this we cannot do. Probably the men still had their doubts, like, we had to do duties in the night, like, going to various remote areas accompanied only by a driver. So even though some of the senior officers had their doubts, but in the lady officers' minds, we were very, very clear. If this to be done, this is to be done. And that's it. So never did it, it's a very professional behavior in that, okay, I'm an officer, this is my duty, I do this, and that's it. So never, and as I said, I'm reiterating because I'm speaking for all the lady officers, never has any of my colleagues or my seniors or my juniors ever stepped back saying, no, this is not my domain, I will not do this. Never can that happen. Never does that happen. And I'm talking about back in the 90s. So right now, there's no question at all.
And is it difficult to get tough jobs, like tough and challenging jobs? Like, does that happen that if that decision has to be made, and that a senior is making that decision, and it's a very tough, very critical job, and you have to command, let's say, some officers. Did you ever feel that, the males were getting more kind of those set of jobs, and it was a little difficult for you to get those sort of jobs from the seniors?
No, I don't think so, because when you spend some time in the unit, your commanding officer gets to know who you are as a person and what is your capability, and then there's a trust building that happens. So then they give you because they now know that you can do the job, whatever is interested to you, irrespective of whether how many men you're commanding, or sometimes you're sent on temporary duties, where you're being sent on temporary duties. So they get the confidence by the way that you portray yourself and you behave with the other members in the unit. So yes, I think that's how it is.
Got it. Got it. So, okay. So let me move away from the feminine part of being in the army, but just from an outsider perspective. So if you have to kind of describe how the army life looks like, right, to a civilian, and let's say let's make it a little more fun. So let's say, for example, two, three things. If you can think about something which you feel that civilians probably won't know about the army, or till the time you are there you can't just know about it. Is there anything specific that comes to your mind?
Until you are there, yeah. So I think civilians will not understand the hierarchy in the army. It is we've in the army, a very very rigid hierarchy is followed, so that I think for the civilians it'd be too difficult to digest. I mean, oh my god, this is like just one rank senior and so much respect, and there's a whole the how orders are passed down to the junior, and how feedback or everything goes up to the senior. So that I think hierarchy would I think stand out the army when a civilian looks at it. As another thing is also, as I just mentioned earlier, the kind of respect the and now these days even women officers, like suppose you meet an officer's wife, so the way the courtesy, these things I think they stand out, how you behave like an officer. So within the army circles, I think it is the etiquette and the way you treat each other, the way sometimes in a unit in remote locations, everyone lives like a family. So these are things now civilians probably would find it very difficult. And even now, like after so many years of having lived a retired life, I can guarantee that everyone is in touch with their postmates. All of the army officers are in touch with their postmates, and it's a lifelong bonding bond that they've made. So yes, that again stands out.
And you were in army, right? So and probably did you face any adverse situations being in army, like anything that comes to your mind? And why I'm asking you this question is not just to know an anecdote from you, but to understand that there are few things that we see in certain movies, right? We
Yeah,
see that
yeah.
maybe there can be different situations. So there can be war situations, there can be some some criminal situations, or anything that is happening that you have to deal with being in army, and being in that place. How challenging or how difficult it is when you are actually doing it in reality is something that I am a little interested in knowing, that if you faced any such situation, what were they, what happened, and how did you kind of cope with it?
Yeah, so during the Kargil time, while a lot of action was happening in the north, we also had to guard the Western Front. So units were mobilized, and we all lived along the border in Rajasthan. And at that time, yes, everyone was intense and in very, very remote locations. And it was difficult because, for being a woman, physiologically, I'm speaking, it was difficult. But again, then I had to work around it and, make myself comfortable there firstly, and also get my work done, because at that time I was handling a computer wing. So it became quite difficult because we had to keep a vigil in those areas.
So when you say difficult, do you mean like challenging in terms of like physically challenging, or like is it like mentally really challenging for someone being in that position? Because you don't know. I mean, you don't know if that war can happen. You don't know if anything
Yes.
can turn bad. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, we are always prepared for that. We were always constantly on the watch. You never know what will happen. Anything going to happen from on the Western Front as well. So yes, living in those circumstances, also then living, as I told you, in not, I mean, just tents, and then for me especially, yes, as one lady and all of other men folk all around. So yes, so when I look back, I think that was. Yes, it was quite a difficult and physically challenging, as well as also mentally quite, you had to be on the vigil at all the times, and you never knew what was coming up next. So yes, I think that's what I can think of.
Mm. And like probably something that I wanted to ask last time also when I was talking to someone from an army background, but I missed asking is uh so you probably don't know various adverse situations which can happen because you are in that place, right? So
Right,
an
right.
attack can happen or
Yes,
something, wrong can happen or
right,
anything can happen or war can happen.
right, right.
From a living preparing for that basically,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
uh how would you prepare for that being in army, not just from a physical perspective, which is understandable, you go through some drills, some trainings
Yes,
and all,
yes,
right?
yes,
But
yes.
how does one make sure that mentally someone is ready for that? And why I'm asking you this is because now we hear a lot of people say that armies like, for example, China, armies of, let's say, Russia, who is fighting now, people say that they haven't fought for long, right? They haven't faced those scenarios for long, so a lot of time mentally they are not there, like they're not ready for them to basically face those situations because they have been in peace for a long time, right? How being in Indian army, how do you actually train yourself to be ready for that, specifically when you know that borders every side are challenging, whether it's China, Pakistan, from all perspective? Did you do any drills or did you prepare specifically for that?
Oh yes, I think from day one in the Officers Training Academy, when we undergo training, as I was just telling you, it is all about strengthening your mind first. So before the physical, that's one of the things, but mostly it's about your own, training your mind to think that you can do it, and face and putting yourself through various situations, and still coming out stronger each time. So as they say, the finest steel passes through the hottest fire. So similarly, each cadet is put through that kind of training, and then it doesn't end there. So once you're in your units, again, there's always training happening. You're you with when you're commanding officer, or when you're brigade, or there are various formations. There are bigger formations, so they keep having training activities. So I mean, it's an ongoing process. So it's not, every we are always in the army. When you are an officer, or you're another rank, and whoever you are, you're always prepared, and you're trained, and you're ready for any circumstance that comes up.
Awesome. Fine, ma'am. So we'll move a little bit from your army life, I think, to your career now in the writing. And I think it is something I've seen a lot of. Before we actually talk about your career in writing, I want to understand that a lot of people from army, when they, or army, when I say, I'm talking about all the forces, when they basically come out from these, I've seen that a lot of people doing really well in various alternate careers, right? So does the army teach you some life skills which helps you basically post army, or is there some specific training that happens during the army which changes you as a person or makes you ready for an alternate career post army?
Yes, you're right about, everyone's doing well. So I feel very proud to say that when I look around my own course-mates, and, whoever has been in the armed forces is doing well. And I think again, it's just a mental makeup. I think, okay, now, now my first innings is over. Now let me, get ready for the second innings. It's about a preparation, and it's about the mental makeup of, okay, this is how I prepare. This is how I'll do step by step. There's a lot of organizing, and that discipline that they have attained being an armed forces officer, that also comes into play. Then obviously they are upskilling themselves. That usually would happen once they are out of the uniform. Then they also undertake a lot of courses, and they know what the market requires, and then they gear up for that. So I think all the training that they've had through serving in the armed forces, I think everything comes together when again once they leave the service, and they again able to pick up the thread and start all over again, and again succeed in whatever they pick up.
So do you think that it is more of I think what I probably see from outside, it looks like that it's more about the discipline that obviously you guys have to go through when you are in that position of responsibility, and of course mental makeup which makes you ready to probably start from scratch. Because if I look at myself right now, and if I have to basically think about changing my career altogether, such a difficult choice to make, right? And I know it's a forced choice for someone coming from the armed forces background, but it looks like a difficult choice because you are always doubting your skills, whether you are made for, because you've done something for so long, are you good enough to do something else? Looks like that it's more about the mind and the discipline to me, actually.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. That's what I think we discussed. Yeah, it is just about making up your mind. Okay, now my service is in the armed forces is over. Now I'm taking a next step. Let me look around and learn how things are being done. And they're quick learners also. So they understand, okay, now so-and-so course I need to do if I need to get there. And another one, a very important thing I must emphasize here is there's a very strong network. There's a very strong network, everyone supports each other. So the moment you know that someone needs help, or someone may have some doubts as to what should I do next, or what course should I do, or where should I go, or where a certain course will be done well, a lot of things like that. So there's always a very strong network of the Faujis who will always help out and say, okay, do this now. Or sometimes there's a lot of hand holding. What I'm trying to say is, it's not the crab mentality. It's not about pulling each other down. It's about lifting each other up. So I think that again helps a lot, because someone who's already established, when they help you out, it is really a boon, because then you know exactly, okay, what you should do and where you should go, and so that really helps.
Okay, so ma'am, let's talk a little bit about your career post your army, specifically into writing. Before we go and talk a little bit about your books, I think I'll admit that I've just gone through the summaries of all of that, seen a little bit of videos on all of that, yet to read on them. But I have certain questions which I'll ask. But let's talk about the craft of writing first. I think from a perspective of anyone listening to this, I think most of the people always in their lifetime once think about writing a book. Everyone thinks that they can write, and then I think people who start, I think 9 out of 10 would kind of stop in between, and they would not continue. They will think that it's not meant for them. So how did this writing came about, right? And how did you had the discipline to basically write the entire book down, and now you've written, I think, 4 of them, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for me, I always liked writing. So I remember when I was posted, in my initial days, I was posted in a place called Panagarh. I used to write very long letters. At that time, there was no phone. I mean, very less of, the mobile phone wasn't there at all. All we had was that STD subscriber trunk dialing. That was it. And that we had to, wait to call after 9 o'clock. So it would be a little, economical. So I remember writing long letters to my friends and my family, and everyone used to keep, telling me that, okay, describe a few things more. How about this? How about that? So I realized that I enjoyed the process of writing, and I used to write journals. And so when I was released from the army, I thought people, used to randomly ask me, "Hey, you were in the army. How was it? Was it very tough?" Just like some of the questions that you asked me right now, and I thought that, oh, people are so keen to know. So why not use my whatever little I know? Let me try writing. But then I realized that it's not easy, because I've not had any formal training at all. I mean, I've not done journalism, nor do I have so much of understanding of the language that I'm writing in, which means I had to really learn a lot. So initially I started blogging, and when that was accepted and people liked it, then I started sending out articles to magazines like Femina and so many others. Like when I travel somewhere, I would write those travel stories, and I would send it to magazines, and then they would be published. So initially I started with very short pieces like 1,000 words and 1,200 words. That was it. And then I thought, okay, now let me try writing a short story. Now a short story is not like an article. which means that you need to put in dialogues, you need to set up the atmosphere. And then that time, to me, it felt very challenging. At the moment I started writing a short story, I thought, oh my God, this is not getting anywhere. Nothing is happening, After writing, I would read through and say, oh, nothing. It's just not good. And then again, I would go back on the internet and learn what are the things, what are the elements of a story, how do you write it? So there's a lot of learning that has gone into that. And only then did I actually submit my story idea at the Kala Ghoda Arts Festival in Mumbai. They had this open book pitch contest. So anyone could pitch a book idea, and I pitched my book idea, and that got picked up. And then I wrote my novel. Obviously, editors did a brilliant job of editing it. And then She's a Jolly Good Fellow was published like that. And once one book was published, then I knew, okay, I just enjoyed the process. Although it is quite, it's not so easy because, we have something in our mind as a writer. Now, as a reader, if I'm not able to convey through my words that emotion to you when you're the reader, then I failed as a writer. So, but when I wrote She's a Jolly Good Fellow, which was based on some of my own experiences in the army, I got a lot of good feedback, and people said they enjoyed reading it. Some of them said they found it very humorous, and so all these words of encouragement really helped. And I thought, okay, now let me start writing more. And then I thought of other ideas that I could write about, and that's how now I've written about a matrilineal society. So that's how it is a very gradual progression. And even then, I would always reiterate that it is a craft, and you have to be constantly working at it. I don't think anyone can say that, okay, now I'm good enough, now I can sit back and relax, now I've become a very good writer. I don't think so. I'm still learning. Every day I'm learning. I'm trying to get better at the craft.
So there is one thing about, actually writing it down, but then I probably have a question like a step before that. Like, what's the process of, writing such a book, like such a long, story? When I say such a long story, when I'm comparing it from an article or from a blog, right? It's a big enough responsibility or for someone to start and then finish the book as well, right? So like, did you had a process wherein you probably would sit in for 3 hours every day, or like for 4 hours every day and write? Or was it like that when something came to you, then only you will put it down? How was the process like, and how should the process be like for someone who's probably willing to write a book?
Yeah, so well, I would not be able to say how should the process be, because that process depends from person to person. All I can tell you is what works for me. So for me, what I do is, when I have a story, when I know that this is a story I want to say, I just make a very short synopsis, just about 2 or 3 pages. So in which I'd say, okay, there was this character, and then they met this character, or what is the plot of the story, what is the atmosphere would be, and that's it. And what happens in the story, essentially. I just, that's it. So that I have it in 2 pages, and this is usually for me, I write it in longhand. So now I have the synopsis. So when I conducted, I conduct writing workshops, and I realized that most people, what happens is they start writing, because now a novel takes time to write. So they start writing, and somewhere midway, they just, lose track. They didn't know. They sometimes they just don't understand where was I heading to. They just feel lost, and that's when you don't complete your book. So I've come across a lot of people who have said that, oh, I started but I couldn't finish it. So for them, I would say that this is what works for me. So I make it's like a blueprint. So I have my story there, and now the job is of expanding it. So I put in the dialogue, I have more characters, secondary characters come in, then there are subplots, these things happen. But and as I'm going, let's say I reach midway through the book, and then suddenly I suppose I'm lost. Oh, where was it going? What was this character supposed to do now? Again, then I refer back to my synopsis. What was the whole, my whole story going to be? So I do this back and forth quite a lot. And during the process of writing, it even changes. So sometimes I start off with a synopsis, saying, okay, this is what the story is going to be. But sometimes in the middle, I think, no, this character is looking interesting. Now let me add some more, give this character a 3-dimensional personality, and make him or her a little more alive on the pages. So that is a creative process. So I have follow a little bit of structure, and then the creative process takes on. Anytime I'm feeling lost, I have this to refer back to my synopsis. I see, okay, and okay, now I get back to the other one. This is, for me, this is how it works. As I said, it may not be everyone's way of working, but this one works for me.
And would you like sit for particular hours every day to write, or is it like when when you want to basically write something, you would just write then?
Yeah, actually, it is good if writers have the discipline to sit down and write, say, how many hours in a day. And For me, but I think I'm not as disciplined as so many other writers who do that. For me, what happens is, between books, I'm in a stage wherein nothing is really happening, and I give myself that time. I don't stress myself out saying that, okay, 3 hours I have to write what. So for me, that question comes up, and then some idea emerges, and then I'm so gripped by that idea, then it doesn't matter. I can work as so many hours in a day, and just to get that going, to get that get to the finish line. So for me, that's how it works. So when I'm working on a book, I'm fully into it. And then I may or may not take a little time off, or write something else, until another good idea grips me, and then I totally get into it. And then it doesn't matter to me how many hours or anything. But some days are free. I mean, some days I may just be reading, like I mean, that's how it works for me. As I said, it works differently for different people.
Does it ever happen that you have an idea, you started writing something down, and you feel, okay, this is something that I'm now going to write my book on, and midway, or let's say 5-7 days into it, you realize, okay, probably it's not that interesting, maybe I'm reading this, or this looks like a more interesting idea, I should probably write about that. Like, does your mind ever take you into directions while you are in this
Yes.
process?
Yes, it does. It does. One or two ideas I had to abandon because I thought it was going well, and then somewhere in midway I realized, no, this is like, it's not as exciting or interesting, the way that I thought it would be. On the pages, it's not probably coming out the way I wanted it. Then I just put it aside for some time, and maybe I'll come back to it later. Look at it once again. Sometimes we need to give space it out. Sometimes we just have to put it aside and do anything else, but not that. Then again your brain starts to work, and then you think, oh, this could be done with that character, character could be the other character. Suddenly the brain kind of, the wiring happens when you put the thing away. And I think that's a creative process. And But yes, sometimes you do have to abandon some of the ideas, like, because it just isn't working. You must have tried for a little bit, and then you realize, oh, no, not this, that way. That also happens. Yeah. So with me, it does.
No, I think the reason I asked you this question is because I know a lot of people who would start, and it's not just about writing, it's about taking any big challenge. And when I say challenge, I mean something which would need you to be disciplined for a long enough time to complete something. And eventually, when you are in that process, and when the process becomes a little boring, a lot of people would want to switch to something else, and everything else seems more interesting, right? So and that's where I think a lot of things are left in between, like people won't go about completing it. So and I think it happens with everyone, but I think a lot of people feel that people who end up completing things are superhumans. They never get that feeling. They're completely into discipline, and they keep going on. I think it's more about being there and completing things while other things are also distracting you. That's what I wanted to basically get out from the question and your response.
Yeah. It does. It is. I mean, there are so many things that are which are happening in our life. But then in your mind, you need to prioritize your craft. I do that because when I guard my time, like, okay, this much, so many hours is mine, and I'm going to write, and I'll try. I write, and for me, the most difficult part is editing. That's a little time when I tend to, it gets repetitive, and sometimes you're a little confused. Should a certain part be there? It should not be there, and you want a second opinion. Sometimes. So then I have my friends or my family members read it, and then I get their input. Then I again start working on it. So I think it's a whole process, and yeah. But one thing is that you need to if a story idea really grips you, I'm sure you will complete it. I mean, then in your mind, there's no way anyone can prevent me from getting to the finish line. So that's in your mind again. So yes, I this one, and I tell myself today, by the end of this day, I should have done this much. And for me, it's a deadline I set for myself. I do that so many times. Otherwise, things never get done, because you need to prioritize your work or your craft.
Completely agree. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit about your first book, not just from a perspective. I think it's been long. I think you probably published it in 2012 or 13, or I'm wrong?
2010.
Okay,
Yes.
2010. So it's like being 13 years. Probably you are very bored of questions on your first book, but then only one question, and then probably you can move to other books. So I know it's about like two women like in the army. As you said, probably a lot of your real life, experiences and learnings going in your first book.
Yes.
When you are and what I want to understand from you is that anything real that you picked up to be part of the book which you thought would be interesting for people to know, anything that you can remember?
Yes. So at the Officers Training Academy, the gentlemen officers and the the gentlemen cadets, they're called, and the lady cadets, all of us, for our PT, we used to wear shorts. That was just everyone just wore shorts, shorts and t-shirt and shoes. That's it. So when I went to my first unit, it just, it was just a progression, because from the Officers Training Academy, now we are at the unit. So I remember going to the PT Fallen at my first unit, and I was again in shorts. And then one of the senior officers said, no, he said, go, it was conveyed to me that I'd return to my room. I was totally lost, and I was wondering what happened. Everything is right. I'm wearing my proper shorts and, just my PT rig. So what happened? Then I got to know later, it was conveyed to me that no, here you need to have full length trousers, because, it's not just about officers. I mean, there are other people from other backgrounds as well, and a lot of people from rural backgrounds as well. So you cannot be, wearing this kind of thing. You need to wear full length trousers. So then I got my trousers stitched and all that. So yes, things like that. This has found a place in the book that I wrote.
And I think from a theme perspective, I think you talk about two different characters, right? When
Yes.
One of the character is, for a lack of better word, more masculine in the thoughts and everything. The other character is basically more, reserved and like a normal, when I say normal, I mean the normal positioning of a female, right? For you, like, was it a conventional choice to take in the army that, I have to be more like man, behave like men, probably have those thoughts like men, or kind of act like men, so that I'm more accepted? Like, does that happen? Does that happen to you in reality as well? Or do you feel that was just for the book's sake that you have kind of put those
No,
things in
so
there?
see, yes. So for the book now, I have heightened each of these traits, I would call. Yeah. So for me in real life, I knew that I had to do my job well, and I knew that I wanted to earn respect of the people that I was with, and which meant that I had to be very professional. So I kind of downplayed the feminine bit a little. Because then you don't want to come across. So I would not be in my unit. I would not be seen wearing, very or what would you call, let's say lace and stuff, things that are usually associated with women. I would not. I would make a conscious choice of not doing all those things. But for my book, I made this very stark difference between these two women characters, because I thought it worked for the story, because one is one wants to be accepted at any cost, and the other one is just trying to figure out what am I like. She's very confused about am I the right fit here in the this kind of a setup. And then how these two women officers, they through various experiences, through meeting a lot of different people, how each one evolves, and how they learn about or what is the right way to be in a male dominated workplace. How can you best be have the both what would you say, best of both worlds? I mean, in the sense that you're an officer, you are a woman, but you can't not be a woman. but at the same time, you're an officer, so how to find the fine balance between these two. So
Right.
so yeah, so that's what I've tried to convey in She's a
Okay.
Jolly Good Fellow.
And how was the process of the book release? So I think I have some questions on your latest book also, but I want to understand that when a writer writes his or her first book, and that goes through the distribution and everywhere, right? Do you remember when the book was released? How was the expectation? How did things happen? And like from a outsider perspective, any budding writer listening to this, what is this process like? Because it's a different process. It's a marketing process. It's a process of your book reaching out to as many places, you earning a little bit also from the book, so that it's your effort has been paid for. How was that process?
Yeah, so obviously, I mean, I was very, very excited because as I was telling you, it was a very gradual process to get to a book firstly, and to know that Hachette India had picked up my book for publication was a very, very thrilling moment for me, and then all the support that came in from the team, the editorial team, the design team, it helped immensely. And then the best part was at the launch. Before the launch itself, the book was sent out to various publications like newspapers, magazines, and a lot of websites. So people were already, it was a very novel thing at that time that a woman who has served in the army is writing about women officers in the army. So it's very authentic, right? So yes, the word spread, and there were a lot of reviews happening. People spoke about it, and Hachette even did a multi-city launch for my book at various places. And I had some very senior writers launch the book, and they had good words to say about the book. So yes, overall it was a very, very thrilling experience, and I think that's a time when all the efforts that you put into a book, so many hours that you sat just with your words and creating a world, it all pays off when you see that people are reading it and getting back to you and saying, oh, how much I enjoyed that book. I think it's immense level of satisfaction that you get. And then so many youngsters, even today, even now, that book is what now, 13 years old. Even just a few days back, again I got a message from just another one girl who said, ma'am, I read She's a Jolly Good Fellow, it's so inspiring. And so it just feels nice to know that young girls just feel so inspired by reading that book, because these characters in the book, they go through a lot of situations, and how each time they thought probably it was getting too difficult, yet they emerged out of those situations, and how they emerged stronger. So when girls read the book, it's like they just feel very inspired. And so many girls have told me, I'm so inspired to join the army. So for me, it just feels so good that, okay, it's a little kind of empowering women, basically about your thought process as to how you should not just give up, or how you should not just listen to when people say that, no, you're a girl, you cannot do it. You should never think like that. So that comes across in the book.
And from a financial perspective, how does that happen? Like, does it say in the contract that you're going to make, let's say, this percent of royalty, or does it give you a fixed cost and say, okay, I mean, this is your like kind of your payment for the work that you have done. Now it's up to us for take it through. Like, how does that happen financially? And I'm not just talking about from your perspective from this book, because it might have changed over the course of last 4 books, but then anyone listening to this wants to become a writer, like how I want them to know the financial side of the writing process as well.
All right. So now there are different kinds of publishers in the market. So I'll talk about the traditional publishers. So with traditional publishers, they pay you an outright advance, and then they pay you a royalty all through. Like every 6 months, there's a royalty. It's lifelong. So you keep getting royalty for the sales of the book. Yeah, with this particular book, my book, She's a Jolly Good Fellow, there's a lot of interest in the film rights. And so, yes, that is another financial avenue for a book when it gets picked up to be made as, let's say, either for a movie or an OTT platform. Then again, there's payment made to the author, and again there could be consultation that they would require from you. Again, these are the ways that a book earns for you.
And when you go and speak about the books at any events, is that also like a paid event, or is it more or from a publicity perspective?
So what happens is that, sometimes the authors make a choice. Now, if you're going to speak for a corporate event, there's a certain fee to it.
Got it.
Yeah, for sometimes when it's for an educational institution, then you would not, there's a lot of difference in between what you would charge for a corporate speaking assignment and what you would charge for let's say a school, maybe just to inspire children sometimes. So again, that depends. So I think each author takes a call as to where he or she wants to go or doesn't want to go, and how much, what kind of a financial arrangement needs to be made.
And how does the royalty look like? Like, what percentage are we talking about? Usually?
Royalty, see, in traditional publishers, royalties between 7.5 to 10%. I'm talking for a paperback. All right. For when you publish your ebook, it goes as high as 35%. So yes, these days there are a lot of authors also who publish directly on KDP, that is Kindle Direct Publishing, and then they're able to get a royalty of up to 70%. So a lot of authors, they do a mix and match, some traditional, some you self-publish. So you have your royalty coming in. But again, there are pluses and minuses for both the sides, because since KDP is an easy platform to publish, you have a lot of people publishing on KDP. But then what happens is sometimes some authors may not edit their work. The quality of work may not be as good as, let's say, a traditional book, wherein so many editors are working on it, kind of, structurally, and copy editing, and so much of editing goes into the cover design. So a lot of work goes into when a book is traditionally published. So yes, it varies. So I think again that's an individual call as to somebody may just feel that okay. Plus another thing is when you're publishing traditionally, it takes a lot of time. It could take up to 1 or 2 years. But I can assure you that it pays off, because the visibility that your book gets when a traditional publisher publishes it, I don't think you will get it when you self-publish it, obviously for obvious reasons. But then there are also publishers, there are also authors who spend a lot on marketing, and then they are visible again. It depends on, it's, as I told you, it's just it's each one's call. So some people would like to wait for 1 or 2 years to be traditionally published, while others may say, oh God, that's like too long. Why should I wait that long? I could get my work, published. I'll just approach, I'll just self-publish it.
Got it.
Yeah, it'll be faster. Within 2 months, your book is out. But again, then how much of a marketing are you doing? Is it what is the visibility of the book? Did it appear in any reviews anywhere in the newspapers or magazines? And are people talking about it? These things, sometimes. So you have to make a choice again, and it depends, as I said.
Got it. So I want to talk. I have 2 specific questions on one of your other book also, and also on the kind of characters that you have specifically chosen for all your books. But before we go there, I think I left a question which is also very critical, and you probably would have some answers on this. Is that, so let's say that I am, or anyone else is in this writing process, and I've written something which I believe is good, right? I'm sure that getting it published and getting it picked by a good publisher is a really difficult thing, right? And specifically for a first-time writer, right? How do you think people should approach this, like, and so that they have the best chance of at least the book getting the right set of publishers, or kind of the kind of writing that they have done, it's justified in the type of publishing that happens for them?
All right. So usually what happens is, whenever we write something, and the first thing is we show our family members, right? And the family members will be like all praise, oh wow, you've written the best book ever, oh God, no one can get better than this is the kind of feedback that you get. So I think that we should rise beyond that. Okay, so we need to be able to accept, as a writer, I need to be able to accept that someone could say that my writing is not good, and I need to be able to accept that, and I need to be able to make it better. So I would suggest that if you're writing your first book, don't just depend on friends and family. Of course, if someone is honest, that really helps. If there's a person who will honestly tell you, okay, this is working, this is not working, please change this part or please edit this part, then it's fine. If there's someone like that, it really helps. Otherwise, I would suggest that you probably need to approach a professional editor and have the editor go through and then make an assessment as to where it stands. We think that sometimes we think that we have written a book extremely well, but when you have someone else like a professional editor go through it, you'll find that there are a lot of things that need corrections. So I think that way, when a professional editor goes through your manuscript, and when you make the changes accordingly, it immediately the standard of the manuscript is elevated. And then you'll also get feedback as to, whether it is good enough for the market or a different kind of, feedback you could get from an editor. So I think that's the way to go about it.
And then you would probably send that manuscript to as many publishers and then hope that someone would take it up?
No. I don't think that's a good idea. The first thing, what I think you should, any writer who is trying to publish a book, is to find an agent, to find a literary agent. So again, that's not easy, because literary agents are connected with publishing houses and they know exactly what each publishing house is looking for. So they only pick up manuscripts that that they think they can sell to the publishing houses. But for a new writer, when you get in touch with an agent and the agent feels, okay, there's a spark in this idea, then they will also, on their part, they will make it more presentable, and then they present it to publishing houses, and then that's the way. Otherwise, in case and again, as I said, it's not easy to find an agent. So if suppose you're not able to find an agent, then you could get in touch with publishing houses directly as well, because there are so many of them don't accept submissions from authors directly, because so many publishers, they just accept manuscripts from literary agents, but there are so many others who accept submissions directly as well. So you could see the guidelines, submission guidelines, and then submit it accordingly.
Do writers have to ever pay also to get published?
That's why I said earlier, there's a difference between traditional publishing and self-publishing. So when you're talking about self-publishing, yes, then you have to pay. But traditional publishing houses are the bigger publishing houses like Penguin and Hachette and HarperCollins and Juggernaut these days, or Readermania. These are all traditional publishers. But there are so many other publishers who will publish anything you write, as long as you pay them. So that's a different category of publishers. I mean,
that's not a good idea to pay the publishers to get published.
As I said earlier, that it's a personal choice. Marketing becomes, and distribution becomes a very difficult thing for when you self-publish.
Got it.
What happens is so many people would pay some money and get the book published. Now, how good are those publishers when it comes to marketing? Is your book available in Delhi, in Kolkata, and Kochi at the same time? Did your book make any appearance in any of the mainstream newspapers? So these things, otherwise, you can say that my book is published, but then it may not get the kind of visibility that you would actually, for all the effort that you put into a book, you would want, people to read it. So that, I think, you miss out when you're going for self-publishing. That's the reason I said some authors, they wait 1 or 2 years and let the manuscript go through the whole process of editing and a lot of processing that traditional publishers do. They go through all that, and if you ask them, they'll say yes, it's worth the wait, because when it is published, people are talking about it. It's there in the magazines, newspapers, and the quality of the book is extremely good. The quality, I mean, the kind of editing that is done is extremely good. So obviously, as I said, it is an author's choice as to what they would like. If they don't have the patience to wait that long, because traditional publishers take very long sometimes even to reply to your emails. Sometimes they may not even reply. So, so do you have that kind of patience to wait and still keep trying for traditional publishers? Or if you're losing out on patience and you just want to get a book published, then yes, you can go ahead. I mean, you just have to weigh the various pros and cons and take a decision.
Got it.
It's an individual choice.
Got it. So all of your books are like most of your books, I think three of them have female characters as the main characters, I guess. Or I think I think one with lot of short stories, I'm not sure.
Right.
So is it a personal choice? Are you trying to get yourself a part of all the characters? That's why all the characters are like the main characters are female characters, or is it something that works for you and that's why you are going about this now?
I think it just comes naturally to me. So when we're writing, we are often told that write about things that you know. So when I am talking, when I create a female character, I'm able to get into the female character's head, and make her believable on the pages. All right. So I think, when especially when I wrote She's a Jolly Good Fellow, it was like it's I like to make it inspiring for when the girls or women, they pick up the book and they read, they need to feel, okay, good, if she has been through that and she has come out stronger, I can also do it, that kind of a thing. So yes, for my books, yeah, I think that's the reason why I choose female characters. It's not that I'll not write. I mean, if I'm in the mood, or if I find a male character who just has to be written, so I will write. I mean, there's nothing hard and fast about it. It just so happened.
No, the genesis of the question was that usually you would find few things that works for you, and it can be because you are that person, right? Or maybe you're a female. You can think about, as you said, you can get in the head of a female character, so it works for you. So anyone probably looking to write, you may not want to force yourself to be someone who you're not, right? Or you can just be more comfortable in your own shoes and create characters from
Yes, yes.
from that
Yeah.
angle. That's
Yes,
yeah.
yes, obviously, because then, otherwise what happens, so many times when we're writing, we stop writing or we lose interest midway because we are in ourselves are not interested in our own story. And that usually would happen when you're creating two-dimensional characters, wherein the character is not fully formed. As a writer, all of us are trying to create three-dimensional characters, a character that will remain with the reader long after the book has been read. So to create that kind of character, it requires, it's a little complex to create that kind of a character. So I think, so then when you know the in and out and psychology of human beings and how we think and how we act and what a situation, we throw situations at all these characters as they're going through their story, right? And then how they emerge out of these. So yeah, I think, you need to be comfortable in whatever is a character, and to create basically three-dimensional characters, well-rounded, well-developed characters.
Okay. So I think I'll talk about your recent book. Sorry. I'll talk about a recent book. I think if I got the name right, it's The Grand Matriarch of Malabar, where you're talking
Yes.
about the matriarchy society that exists in, those regions,
Yes.
vis-a-vis 90% of India specifically. In fact, the world is more on the patriarch side. So before we go about talking about the book, I just want to understand from you, someone who has written about this theme now, what do you think is the speciality or differentiation factor of a matriarchal society, and how is it better than for lack of better word, from a patriarch society?
Well, I would not say it's better or worse. I mean, it is not about really comparing the patriarchy and matriarchal systems, but it's just that that's how it evolved in the society. So yes, like you mentioned, all over the world, it's patriarchal society because that's a kind of ages that we were living in, where men, where the physical strength of men probably was required to have a society going, right? So that's how it evolved. But when we're talking about matrilineal, so now it's not really matriarchy, it's matrilineal. So in Kerala, there was these sections of people where the men folk went for war and the women had to take care of everything. So that's how this system developed. So it's a different system. Yeah, all systems have got their positives and negatives. So it's just that it evolved in that way because the men folk were always away from their homes. So the women were now took charge of the whole thing, and then they were maintaining their own communities.
So when you researched about this, like, do you have anything that came about which really interested you, or made you feel, kind of motivated enough to write about this? Like, did you find something which differentiates specifically the kind of theme that you've written, and specifically for Kerala and that segment of
Yes.
region?
Yes, yes. What interested me was, how strongly in these matrilineal communities, how strongly a mother feels for her daughter, and the motivation to have her daughter and the family name continue, the lineage continue. So that I found very, very interesting. And being from Kerala myself, I observed this around me, and I thought nothing much has been really written about this. And then that's where I thought, okay, I must write about this kind of a totally different system, because everywhere else in the world it's about father to son, and here the everything goes from mother to daughter, so that way. So that's how I was motivated, because it's totally different, and not much has been really written about this. So I thought I have the story, I have to write this.
And would you want to give a little bit of sneak peek into the story of the book, like just for people? And you're saying that it's 22nd July you were talking about
Yes,
the
yes, yes.
launch
So,
date?
so, so
Yeah.
the official launch will happen on 22nd July at Ata Kalata in Bengaluru. And in case any listener wants to come for the book launch, you're most welcome. It'll be launched by Shiny Anthony, who is the co-founder of the Bangalore Literature Festival. In fact, she was the one who launched my first book, She's a Jolly Good Fellow, back in 2010. And I'm so always, I'm ever grateful to her. So, and she's very supportive of new writers, new authors. So yes, it's the book launch is happening on 22nd July.
And a little bit of sneak peek into the book, like just for people to get a little interested about the idea and the theme from your end.
Yeah, so here there's a mother who wants her daughter, as I told you, it's a matrilineal setup that I have. So here's a mother who wants her daughter to take over the family, or it's called the Taravad in Malayalam. She wants her to take over the Taravad and continue the Taravad name, but the daughter has a handicap. Now, what does the mother do? To what length will she go to ensure that her daughter takes over and also continues the name of the Taravad. So this is just a, so what does she go through? How does she do it? Is she able to do it at all? So these are some of the questions that I answered.
And probably the last question, and this came about when you were answering this. So, do you think, like, and I can be wrong, this question can not make any sense as well. So, do you think in a matrilineal society, as you mentioned, it's more accepting of the males and the power of males in the family vis-a-vis patriarch society, which has kind of downplayed the female in most of the families throughout the ages? Now it's changing, of course. Now it's a little different when everyone is becoming equal. But do you think matrilineal society allows for more room for the male members in the family and in the society in general?
Yes, I do think so. Because if you look at the patrilineal system, I don't think women have been given much position or a voice or power or anything at all. So looking at it that way, I think in the matrilineal system, so when the women are more in control, I think the men folk are better off in that kind of system.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Fine, ma'am. Thank you. I think thank you so much for your time. I think great to know about your experiences both in the army and how that has shaped the other part of your career now when you're writing books and inspired from your characters and the kind of life that you have lived in. I wish you a lot of luck for the book launch, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Ishaan. It was really nice talking to you. And I think you asked some really nice questions, and I hope I've answered them to your satisfaction. Thank you so much.